Warm breath clouds the pane as the 1870s LODZ wool comber steps into the yard before dawn, and we follow his day from the first pale light to the last folded apron. Settle in and let the slow rhythm of the work carry you. The city is still half asleep, though the mills are never fully silent, and somewhere beyond the low roofs a steam engine turns with a muffled patience, as if it has been breathing through the night and will keep breathing long after we have gone quiet. The yard is packed earth, dark with old rain, and your boots make a soft sucking sound where the mud has not yet frozen hard. LODZ in the 1870s is growing quickly, street by street and chimney by chimney, but at this hour it still feels close and human, with smoke settling low over the fences and a thin smell of coal dust caught in the damp air. You pull your collar up, not because the walk is long, but because the morning touches the neck first. We are not rushing. The wool will still be there. Inside the wool room, the warmth gathers slowly and not evenly, so one corner holds the chill of the yard while another has already taken on the sweet animal smell of fleece. You notice it before you see anything clearly, that mixture of lanolin, damp cloth, oil, soap, and wood that has been scrubbed but never quite cleaned. Bales stand along the wall like sleeping animals, tied in coarse sacking and marked with chalk, some from nearby estates and some from farther routes by cart rail and broker. The marks matter to the master, but to you the wool matters by touch. You hang your cap on a peg, tie the apron around your waist, and feel the familiar pull of the knot at your back. The room is not yet bright, only grey at the high windows, so we stand with the others and let the eyes settle. A wool comber in 1870s LODZ does not begin with grand gestures. He begins with hands. He begins with the slow opening of a bale, the first tug of fibre from the packed fleece, and the quiet sorting of what can become smooth thread from what must be set aside. The tools are plain, but they have their own dignity, and you know them the way a clerk knows his pen, or a baker knows the lip of an oven. There are wooden benches rubbed smooth by sleeves, iron combs with long teeth that catch the dim light, small cans of oil, baskets for clean locks, baskets for waste, and a worn cloth where the fibres can be laid out without picking up splinters. In larger LODZ mills, machines are taking more of this work, with rollers, gills, and teeth moving in steady rows, yet in smaller rooms and careful preparations, the hands still do what hands have long done. They feel what the machine would not pause to feel. Before combing, you sort. This is the first quiet lesson of the morning, and it asks for attention without noise. You draw out handfuls of wool and separate the longer locks from the shorter, the cleaner from the matted, the soft from the brittle, and all the while your fingers learn the fleece in a language older than the factory walls. A good lock opens with a faint spring. A poor one clings to itself dull and tight, with straw caught inside, or a burr tucked so deep that it scratches the skin. We can almost hear it, the tiny dry whisper of fibre moving over fibre. The master may call it preparation, and the spinner may call it only the step before the real work, but you know the day turns here. If the wool is poorly sorted, the thread will complain later, and a loom will remember every careless hour. So you sit on the bench, shoulders forward, elbows close, and you make small judgments again and again. Not loudly, not proudly, but with the steady care of someone who knows that good cloth begins before anyone sees cloth at all. The work is repetitive, but it is not empty. It has grain like wood. Outside, a cart passes in the street, and the iron rim of its wheel knocks softly against a stone. Somewhere a church bell gives the hour, though the sound arrives blurred by fog and smoke, and for a moment the room seems to listen with you. Then the wool moves again. You lift another handful, spread it lightly across your lap, and pick out the darker bits, the seeds, the dry yellow grass, the compacted ends that will not draw cleanly. Your hands are already less cold now. The wool has given them back their warmth. In the 1870s, LODZ belongs to many tongues, and the wool room hears them all in low passing scraps. Polish, German, Yiddish, and Russian words drift through doorways, sometimes practical, and sometimes almost musical, when softened by sleep. You may not follow every sentence, but you know the gestures, the nod toward a full basket, the tilt of the head when a bale is poorer than expected, the small sigh when damp wool arrives too tightly packed. Work has its own language. We learn it by watching. A young worker near the window rubs his palms together before beginning, and an older comber shows him how not to pull too hard. You do not tear the fibers into obedience. You coax them open. The longer locks, once loosened, lie across the cloth in pale, uneven fans, and the light makes them look almost silver where the tips catch. It would be easy to call the work simple from a distance, yet up close every movement has measure, and every measure has been learned through aches, mistakes, and mornings exactly like this one. The smell changes when the first warm water is carried in. It comes in pails, steaming faintly, and the room grows clouded at knee height before the vapor thins into the rafters. Not all wool is washed the same way, and not all is washed in this same room, but some must be softened, scoured, or damped enough to behave beneath the combs. Soap leaves a flat, clean scent, but the sheep smell remains underneath, not unpleasant, only earthy and persistent, like a field after rain. You breathe it in because it is part of the day. The washing is not a bright, foaming thing. It is careful and muted. You press the wool through the warm water, lift it, let it drain, and avoid rough handling that might felt the fibers into a stubborn lump. The water clouds quickly, taking dust, grease, and field dirt into itself, and the pail grows heavier with what the wool gives up. Your sleeves darken at the cuffs. The skin around your nails softens. We watch the steam touch the window and vanish. By the time the light has strengthened, the first sorted wool rests in loose heaps for drying and handling, and the room has found its morning pace. The combers sit and stand by turns, each moving within a small territory of bench, basket, and tool. No, one needs to announce the order of things. The day has rails beneath it, and you move along them almost without thinking, from bale to sorting cloth, from sorting cloth to dampened locks, from dampened locks toward the combs that will make the fibers lie in one direction. The quiet is full of motion, and as the first grey hour opens into morning, the 1870s LODZ wool comber moves from sorting and washing toward the slower heart of the craft, where the teeth of the comb begin to draw order from the fleece. The combs wait with a stillness that makes them seem heavier than they are. Their long iron teeth are set into wooden handles, and when you lift one, the weight settles into the heel of your hand with familiar firmness. In some rooms, the combs are warmed before use, not made hot enough for drama, only gently heated so the oiled fibers draw more easily and the grease moves softly through the lock. In LODZ, where the factory world is learning the habits of steam and iron, a hand tool can still feel old, patient, and exact. You hold it like a promise to the thread. The first motion is loading the comb, and it asks you to slow down. You take a small lock, not too much, and press it over the teeth so the fibers catch near their ends. Then another lock and another, laid evenly enough that the comb will not snarl. The wool smells warmer now, and the oil adds a faint, smooth note that clings to the fingers. A drop too much makes the fiber heavy. Too little leaves it dry and stubborn. You learn the middle by feel. When the second comb passes through the first, there is a soft tearing sound, though nothing is really torn if the work is done well. The fibers loosen, separate, and begin to align, while shorter pieces, knots, and bits of matter stay behind in the teeth. The motion draws across the body, steady and controlled, and you feel it in the wrists before the hour is out. We move slowly with you, comb through comb, lock through lock, breath through breath, as the loose fleece becomes straighter, sleeker, and more willing to be spun. It is not quick work, that is part of its comfort. A wool comber in 1870s LODZ is not merely making wool look neat. He is preparing it for worsted yarn, the smoother kind of yarn that asks the longer fibers to lie together rather than crossing every which way. The short fibers, called Noils in some trades, must be removed or set aside, and the long fibers must be drawn into a clean top that can feed the spinner more evenly. You may not use all the distant trade words in your own room, or you may hear them from a foreman who learned them from another country, but your fingers know the difference. Smooth fiber behaves. Tangled fiber argues. The combing bench has its own small weather. A pale drift gathers at the edge, where waste fibers fall like soft dust. Your apron collects threads. Your cuffs pick up a halo of wool, and if you touch your sleeve to your cheek, you feel the faint scratch of stray fibers. The room grows warmer as bodies settle into labor, and the windows remain cloudy from breath, steam, and the damp morning trapped inside. The teeth click now and then. A basket creaks. Someone clears his throat quietly, not to break the silence, but because the air is thick with fiber. There are machines nearby, perhaps in the next room or across the yard, and their rhythm comes through the wall in a low, turning hum. In the 1870s, LODZ is learning to sound like this, with belts, shafts, wheels, and engines making a background that never fully leaves the ear. Yet at the combing bench, your work is still close enough to hear the small sounds. Wool sliding through teeth, oil skinning the fingers, wood shifting under your weight, a breath taken slowly before a knot is teased apart. The hand learns when to resist and when to yield. If the comb catches, you do not yank. You pause, ease the fiber back, change the angle, and try again with less pride. There is a lesson in that, though no one needs to say it aloud. Much of working life is not conquest, but adjustment. You find the angle by trying, by failing softly, by trying again, and then the wool passes through as if it had only been waiting for the correct courtesy. The result lies brighter on the teeth, long strands drawn into one direction, light catching along them like water. From time to time, the foreman passes behind the benches, his boots dull against the planks. He may stop and lift a little of the combed wool between finger and thumb, checking its length and cleanliness. The gesture is small, but the room notices. You keep your eyes on your own hands. In a city like Łódź, where mills rise quickly and names like Scheibler, Geyer, and Poznański travel through conversation like weather, the worker's own world remains close, bounded by task, wage, family, and the condition of the wool in front of him. Great factories may grow outside. The morning still asks for this lock, then the next. The combed fibers are drawn off carefully into a narrow, cloudy ribbon. It is not yet yarn and not yet cloth, but it is already more ordered than when it came from the veil. You pull it with a smooth motion, letting the long fibers gather together as a loose sliver, airy and delicate, easy to disturb if handled carelessly. It rests in the basket like pale smoke. We can see why the work calms the eyes, even while it tires the hands. Disorder becomes line. Clutter becomes softness. The task repeats, and repetition lowers its voice. By mid-morning, the room has settled into the kind of pace that belongs to people who have stopped thinking about beginning. You are inside the day now. The first stiffness has left your fingers, and the motions come with less effort, though the wrists still remember every pass of the comb. The younger worker by the window no longer looks over so often. The older combler beside him gives only an occasional murmur. We stay with the bench, where the wool gathers and the morning grows slowly brighter. There is food wrapped in cloth near your place, perhaps black bread, a little cheese, or a piece of onion, waiting for the pause that will come when the body asks clearly enough. Until then, you work. The thought of food is not a hunger spike, not yet, but a quiet knowledge tucked into the corner of the morning. Your hands smell of wool and oil, and when you wipe them on the apron, the smell remains. It will travel home with you later, into the room where your family knows what kind of day you've had before you speak. A bell or shouted word may mark a pause, though in smaller rooms, it may simply happen by common understanding. One worker stands, another stretches a shoulder, someone opens the door a crack, and cold air enters at floor level, clean for a moment, carrying the street with it. You take your bread and eat slowly because the mouth is dry from fiber and warm air. Crumbs fall into the apron and you brush them away with the back of the hand, careful not to mix them with the clean wool. The pause is part of the work, not separate from it. You sit near the bench, still surrounded by the smell of fleece, and listen as the city beyond the wall grows wider. Horses shift in the yard, a vendor's call passes along the street, thin and practical. Somewhere, a child laughs once and is quickly quieted. LODZ is awake now, and the factories answer one another across the morning with smoke, whistles, carts, and footsteps. But in your little square of the wool room, the world remains made of fiber, breath, and warm bread. When you return to the combs, the tool feels almost friendly in the hand. Its weight has not changed, but your body has agreed to it. This is one of the small mercies of repetitive work. At first the task stands outside you, asking to be learned again in the cold morning light, and then, after enough motions, it moves inward until hand and tool share a rhythm that feels less like effort and more like keeping time. You draw the wool through, and the day draws you with it. And when the morning has worn a smooth path through the room, the LODZ wool comber follows the fibre onward, from the teeth of the comb toward the quieter work of drawing, bundling, and preparing the wool for the next pair of hands. The combed wool has a different presence from the raw fleece. It no longer sits in heavy, uncertain clumps, but rests in soft lengths that seem almost to breathe when lifted. You gather it gently, keeping the fibers aligned, because the order you made can be lost by careless handling. In the 1870s, LODZ wool room, this is where the comber's patience shows most clearly. The hard part is not only pulling tangled wool into line, it is keeping that line calm. You draw the fibers into a sliver, a loose rope without twist, soft enough that a careless tug would thin it too sharply. The motion is slow and continuous. One hand feeds while the other draws, and your eyes follow the thickness, watching for places where the wool narrows or bunches. If it grows too thin, the spinner will curse you later, perhaps not by name, but with the weary irritation of someone whose thread has betrayed her. If it grows too thick, the yarn will answer unevenly. So you keep watching. We keep watching with you. The basket for finished tops sits at your feet, lined with cloth so the fibers do not catch on rough wicker. Each length is laid in a coil or folded softly, depending on the habit of the room, and the pale wool begins to build in layers. It looks peaceful there, but it is the result of many decisions. Which lock to use, how much oil, how many passes through the comb, when to stop. The work hides its own intelligence under quiet repetition, which may be why people who do not do it often fail to see it. There is a powdery softness in the air now, the fine drifting lint that catches in lashes and settles along the edge of the bench. You blink more often. You drink water when you can, and it tastes faintly at the tin cup. The floor underfoot is scattered with small scraps, darker bits of wool, and stray vegetable matter that will be swept later. A broom leans in the corner, its handle polished by use. Even the broom belongs to the rhythm. In LODZ, the wool comber's day is tied to others he may hardly know. The sorter before him, the washer, the dyer, the spinner, the weaver, the fuller, the finisher, the clerk who weighs the bundles, and the cartman who carries goods through streets lined with mud and brick, all form a chain that no one sees in full while working. You see your part, and perhaps that is enough. Your part is fibre made ready. Your part is patience made visible in wool. Now and then a bundle must be weighed or checked. The scales may be simple, with worn metal pans and a set of weights kept close by, dull from many fingers. You place the prepared wool carefully, because even weighing can disturb it. The pointer trembles, settles, trembles again. The foreman notes the amount, or someone marks a tally in a book, and the pencil sound is dry against the paper. The numbers will become wages, orders, shipments, accounts, and arguments. But for now, they are only marks beside a day's labor. The room has more color than it first seemed to have. Raw fleece can be cream, grey, brown, yellowed at the tips, or almost white where it has been well washed. The wood of the bench is amber where hands have rubbed it smooth, and grey where damp has entered. Iron tools darken at the joints. Aprons fade into a shared colour of work, neither clean nor dirty exactly, only used. The light from the high window moves slowly across these things, and you start to know the hour by where it rests. A boy brings more oil, and the little can makes a hollow sound when set on the bench. He is too young to be trusted with the finer combing, but he watches everything, because watching is how the room teaches before it speaks. You remember being that size, perhaps in another town or another trade, when adult work seemed like a closed door with small cracks of light around it. Now you are inside the door, and it is less mysterious than you imagined, but not less worthy of care. The slivers are gathered, wrapped loosely, and kept from dirt. You do not pack them hard, because air is part of their order. A good bundle looks almost too light to matter, yet it carries hours inside it. When lifted, it has a strange living softness, and when pressed gently, it springs back. The wool remembers the sheep, The field, the washing, the comb, and the hand, all without a word. We listen to that silence because it is the true sound of many old trades. By now the first weariness has entered the shoulders. It is not pain with a story, only the plain heaviness of doing one motion carefully for a long time. You roll one wrist when no one is watching. You press thumb into palm, then you return to the wool, because the body knows the difference between complaint and limit, and most working days live somewhere between the two. The bench holds you there. The next lock waits with complete indifference and complete trust. Some days the wool is easy and opens like a well-kept drawer. Other days it resists, filled with knots, burrs, and short tangled bits that make the comb stutter. The 1870s LODZ wool comber learns not to take either kind personally. Good material is a kindness, poor material is a condition, and both must pass through the day. There is a calm in this, when we let it be calm. The work is not about winning, it is about continuing. At the far end of the room, someone begins to hum under his breath. It is barely a tune, more a line of sound laid under the combing, and it disappears whenever footsteps approach. Then it returns. The hum is low, rough, and comforting, like a thread that does not need to be seen. You do not join it, perhaps, but your hands answer. The combs move at the same unhurried pace, and for a few minutes the whole room seems to draw breath together. And as noon approaches and the light lifts higher over the yards of LODZ, the wool comber's work shifts again, not away from repetition, but deeper into the ordinary human details that carry a long day to its middle. Midday does not arrive as a bright command. It spreads slowly through the room, first as stronger light on the floorboards, then as hunger, then as the slight loosening of conversation. The 1870s LODZ wool comber has already given several hours to sorting, washing, combing, and drawing, and now the day begins to feel less like a beginning and more like a lived-in place. You know the sound of every nearby bench. You know who sighs before standing. You know which comb has a tooth that catches. When the meal pause comes, the room changes without becoming quiet. Tools are set down, but not carelessly. Finished wool is covered or moved aside. Hands are wiped on aprons, then on cloth, though the smell of oil remains in the creases of the fingers. You unwrap bread, perhaps rye bread, dark and dense, and something salted enough to make the mouth wake. If there is tea, it is weak and warm, and the cup gives more comfort through the hands than through the tongue. We sit with you near the wall, where the draught is smaller, and the bench makes a backrest if you lean carefully. The floor is still rough under your boots. Steam pipes or stove warmth may touch one side of the body while the other side cools. Someone speaks about rent, someone about a sick child, someone about a cousin who found work in a cotton room, and the talk does not rise high because there is work again soon. It is the kind of conversation that belongs to people saving strength. Nothing is wasted, not even speech. LODZ in the 1870s is a city of arrivals. Men and women come from villages, small towns, German-speaking settlements, Jewish streets and farming places where the old rhythms have not vanished but no longer feed everyone. You may have come recently, or your family may already know the factory streets well. Either way, the city asks you to learn new measures of time. Not sunrise and fieldwork only, not market days and church bells only, but whistles, shifts, tallies, wages, and the long breath of machines behind walls. Still, the old world has not left the room. It is in the bread wrapped in cloth. It is in the way someone crosses himself before eating, while another murmurs a blessing almost silently. And another simply lowers his head because the body understands gratitude without ceremony. It is in the patch on a sleeve, sewn by lamplight. It is in the habit of saving string. You notice these things because work makes people close without making them fully known. We share space, and still each worker carries a private house inside him. After eating, your hands are a little clumsy at first. The fingers have cooled. The body, having been fed, would gladly slow further, but the day does not make that offer. You return to the bench and touch the comb handles again, and the wood feels both familiar and newly hard. The first few passes restore the rhythm. Wool catches, loosens, glides. The noise of the room gathers itself, and soon the meal pause feels like something that happened far earlier as if time inside work folds differently from time outside it. This is one of the quiet truths of the LODZ wool room. Hours can seem long when named, but shorter when filled with the same careful action. A clock may say that little has passed, while your shoulders know a great deal has happened. A basket that was empty is full, a bale that stood proud against the wall is slumped and open, waste has gathered in soft drifts, the day writes itself in materials, and your body reads the page before your mind does. In some parts of the factory, speed is more visible. Looms throw shuttles, spinning frames draw thread, and belts move overhead with a continuous obedience to power. Here, speed is quieter. It lives in not stopping. It lives in making no unnecessary motion, in reaching for the oil without looking, in clearing a knot before it becomes a worse knot, in placing each prepared length where it will not need to be handled twice. A good comber does not hurry wildly. He wastes less. Your fingers become sensitive to small differences others might miss. A lock from one sheep line feels longer and cooler. Another feels dull, perhaps poorly kept or badly washed. Some wool gleams when drawn, catching light along the length of the fiber, while some sits matte and stubborn. The comber's judgment is not grand, but it is intimate. You know the world by touch. You know it through thumb, forefinger, nail, wrist, palm, and the soft resistance of fiber opening under pressure. Near the doorway, damp coats hang from pegs and give off a smell of street mud and smoke. The door opens now and then, and with each opening comes a small report from outside. A cart has tipped awkwardly in the lane. A delivery is late. A foreman is looking for someone from the scouring room. These messages pass through, then vanish, because the wool remains. LODZ may change outside by the year, by the month, almost by the week, but the lock in your hand still requires the same patience. There may be women working nearby, perhaps sorting, tying, carrying, washing, or tending another part of the preparation. And the room's labor is shared, though not always equally named. Children's hands may do small tasks where the household needs every wage, though in our telling we stay close to the adult comber and the calm order of his bench. The human fact is simple and old. Textile work was rarely one person's work alone. Families, rooms, streets, and mills all leaned into it together. A scrap of humor passes quietly, not sharp, not cruel, just enough to soften the afternoon before it begins. Someone compares a knot in the wool to a landlord's heart, and the joke is small enough to survive without laughter. A few smiles answer it. Then the combs move again. Warmth returns to the hands. We notice how the room allows these little human sparks, then covers them again with labor, as ash covers an ember without putting it fully out. By the middle of the day, your apron has become a map of the morning. Oil marks darken one side, pale fibers cling near the waist, a crumb remains caught near the hem. You brush it away and continue, not because anyone will inspect the apron, but because order outside the work helps order inside the work. The bench is cleared, the basket is shifted, waste is separated, clean wool is protected. These small arrangements are not decoration. They are how a person stays steady. And as the meal hour fades into the long, even stretch of afternoon, the LODZ wool comber returns to the deeper rhythm of production. Where the room grows warmer, the light begins to lean, and every finished bundle quietly carries the evidence of his hands. The afternoon begins with a thicker warmth, not bright or cheerful, but close and settled, as if the room itself has been wearing a wool coat since dawn. The high windows have lost their morning grey, and now they hold a pale working light that makes the loose fibers shine along the bench. You lift another prepared lock, and the smell rises with it, that mild animal warmth mixed with oil, soap, damp wood, and the faint bitterness of coal smoke. The 1870s LODZ wool comber knows this hour well, because it asks for steadiness after the body has already spent its freshest strength. The comb teeth are checked before the next stretch of work, and you run a rag along them with slow care, freeing trapped noils and tiny scraps of straw. A bent tooth can make trouble far beyond its size, catching fiber, snagging the lock, and turning a smooth draw into a jerking pull that tires the wrist. So we look closely, as you look closely, at the dark iron lines set in their handle, each tooth a small promise of order. The tool is plain, but by now it feels almost personal. A little more oil is worked into the wool where the fibers need help, and the thumb spreads it with a motion learned over many days. The shine should be barely visible. Too much oil leaves the top heavy and dull, while too little makes the wool dry enough to resist the comb. You do not measure this with a spoon. You measure it by memory, by the drag across the palm, by the way the lock opens when the comb passes through it, and by the quiet agreement between hand and fiber. Outside, the afternoon traffic of LODZ has found its full, low murmur. Cartwheels turn through mud, boots pass near the yard gate, and voices rise from the street before being swallowed by brick walls and factory noise. Inside, you hear only pieces of it. A horse snorts. A man calls to another man. A gate latch drops with a dull iron note. These sounds do not interrupt the wool room because they belong to the same working day, moving around you like water around a stone. The wool on the bench is less forgiving now, taken from a bale that has been pressed too long or stored in a damp corner. It clings to itself. It hides small knots. You slow your hands because haste would only make it worse. And we can feel the patience gathering in the fingers as you ease apart each lock before setting it to the comb. The task is not heroic. It is almost humble in its exactness, and that is why it has a calming weight. The fiber asks, and you answer. From time to time, the finished slivers are carried away, not far, only to a table or basket where someone else will check them before they move onward. You watch them go with a small private satisfaction because they have passed through your hands and left the bench better than they arrived. In a large industrial city where a person can feel easily hidden among chimneys, ledgers, machines and owners' names painted above gates, this simple evidence matters. A heap of combed wool is not a monument, but it is proof. You were here, and your care has taken shape. The afternoon rhythm is less about beginning than about conserving. You stand only when sitting has made the back stiff, then sit when standing has made the feet complain. You shift the basket a little closer. You adjust the bench cloth. You rub the side of one thumb where the skin has grown tender, then return to the same motion without ceremony. The LODZ wool comber's day is made of these small corrections, and we stay beside them because they are the truth of long work. There is a sound the comb makes when the fibers are nearly right, softer than the first pass and smoother along the ear. You listen for it without quite meaning to. It tells you the short pieces have mostly been drawn away, that the long fibers are lying together, that the wool is ready to be gathered into top. A stranger might hear only scraping. You hear readiness. Work teaches the ear just as it teaches the hand. In the corner, the wastebasket has grown full of shorter fibers, knots, dust, and the vegetable matter that would not pass forward. Nothing in a textile room disappears simply because it is set aside. Some waste may be sold for lower uses, some reused in rougher goods, some swept away, and some merely gathers until a boy carries it to where the foreman says it belongs. You look at it without contempt. Even waste has weight, smell, and purpose, and even the poorer fiber once warmed a living animal through weather. The light shifts across the floor, and the boards show every scratch, every old stain, every place where chair legs have worried the grain. A worker crossing the room leaves a pale trail of lint around his boots. You notice the way his apron brushes the table, the way his sleeve is mended near the elbow, the way his hand reaches automatically to keep clean wool from touching the floor. These gestures are not taught once and then remembered. They are taught every day by consequence. The room grows quiet for a while, not silent, but quieter than before. Hunger has passed. Talk has thinned. The body enters that afternoon place where thought becomes slow and practical, and the mind rests inside the next motion. You draw, clear, align, and draw again. The combs answer. The fibers lengthen. The basket fills. We do not need a new event to hold us because the work itself has become the event, repeating with a softness that lets the listener drift. And as the afternoon wears on, the 1870s LODZ wool comber turns from the central labor of combing toward the small acts of checking and repair where a long day protects itself from mistakes. A finished top can look almost perfect while hiding small faults, so you lift it gently and let the length pass through your fingers. You are feeling for unevenness, for a thick place that may trouble the spinner, for a hidden burr, for a weak stretch where the fibers were drawn too thin. The wool is cool now, no longer warm from the comb, and it moves with a silky drag across the skin. We slow down here. The day's speed, such as it is, must make room for inspection. The LODZ wool comber does not always have the luxury of doing things twice, yet the work sometimes demands exactly that. A rough section goes back to the comb. A small tangle is teased open. A bit of straw, nearly invisible, is found by touch and picked out with the fingernail. This is where a tired worker can lose the thread of care, and this is where an experienced one becomes quieter rather than faster. You learn that the end of a task deserves the same attention as the beginning. There is a little soreness along the fingers, especially where the comb handle presses and where damp wool has softened the skin. Your palms carry faint lines of grease, darker in the creases, and no quick wiping removes them fully. The smell of oil has settled into you. Later, when you lift a cup or open a door at home, it will still be there, a modest sign of the day. No one needs to ask where you have been. The work will answer from your hands. A tally is made as the checked wool is set aside. Perhaps the mark is scratched into a board, or written in a ledger by someone with cleaner cuffs, or counted aloud by the foreman as bundles move across the table. We hear the pencil, the rustle of paper, the dry tap of a weight being shifted. These sounds belong to industry as surely as engines do. Every bundle must become an amount, every amount must become a record, and every record will travel farther than the worker who helped create it. In the 1870s, LODZ is a place where records multiply. Mills keep accounts, merchants send letters, warehouses mark receipts, and rail lines make distance feel different than it did in the old days. Yet at the bench, the world remains close enough to fit beneath your palms. You do not need to know the final buyer of the cloth, or the shop where it might one day hang, or the shoulder it might warm in another town. You only need to know whether this fiber is clean, long, and aligned. That is enough for the present hour. A small repair is made to a basket where the lining has come loose. You thread a cord through the worn edge, pull it tight, and knot it with hands that know knots from daily necessity. The cloth lining matters because rough wicker can catch and disturb the prepared wool, and a catch repeated many times becomes real loss. In work like this, care hides inside ordinary objects. A cloth, a peg, a rag, a well-swept floor, and a basket set in the right place can save more trouble than a shouted correction. Someone nearby cleans a comb by drawing waste from between the teeth, and the trapped fibers come away in little greyish ropes. They are set aside, not tossed wildly, because even the lesser materials have a destination. The teeth gleam faintly after cleaning, dark iron shining where the rag has passed. You hold your own comb up to the light. One tooth is dulled at the tip, and you make a note in the mind to avoid loading that side too heavily. The tool has its moods, though the moods are made of wear. The air is thick enough now that the throat feels lined with fiber. You swallow, drink, and breathe through the nose when you remember. The water in the cup has gone room warm with a taste of metal and dust, but it eases the dryness. We notice these modest comforts because they keep the day human. A sip of water, a shoulder rolled once, a window opened for a short minute, a rag shaken outside the door before the lint settles back into the world. The wool itself has many lives before it reaches this room, and sometimes your mind wanders through them while the hands continue. You imagine sheep on a broad estate, mud on their legs, weather in their fleece, and the shearing that left the locks folded and pressed into sacks. Then merchants, carriers, railway clerks, storemen, and factory hands bring the wool toward LODZ, where it enters the warmth and discipline of the textile city. By the time it rests on your bench, it has already travelled through many ordinary labours. That wandering thought is not a distraction if the hands remain true. Many workers think in this way, not with grand reflection, but with a soft inward drift that accompanies repetition. You may think of home, of bread prices, of a loose hinge, of a child's cough, or of nothing clearly named at all. The wool keeps passing, the comb keeps moving. The body continues its learned route, and the mind walks a little path beside it, returning whenever the fibre catches. A bell marks another point in the day, or perhaps only the angle of light tells you the same thing. The afternoon is no longer young. On the window glass, smoke has left a faint film. and when the sun presses through it, the room glows in a muted yellow-brown haze. The wool looks warmer in that light, less silver and more cream. Your own shadow leans across the bench, crossing the fiber without touching it. There are moments when the work seems to make time visible. The full basket is morning-made material. The swept waste is effort fallen away. The oil darkening the rag is a record of contact. The ache in the wrist is not separate from the finished top, but part of it, just as surely as the comb marks are part of the fiber's path. We can rest in that thought without needing to sharpen it. Work leaves traces, and some traces are quiet. And when the light begins to lower against the high windows, the LODZ wool comber moves into the last careful stretch before evening, where the pace does not quicken, but the room starts to think about completion. The final hours of a workday can be deceptive. They seem close to ending, and yet they often ask for the most patience. You have done enough to be tired, but not enough to be finished. The 1870s LODZ wool comber knows this feeling as well as he knows the handle of his comb, and we follow him through it gently, without forcing the hour forward. The wool still needs clean hands. The bench still needs order. The next bundle still deserves the same quiet attention. More raw locks are sorted for one last batch, though perhaps not as many as in the morning. You pull them apart beneath the fading light, and the difference between good fiber and poor fiber must be felt more than seen. The room's colors have flattened. Brown, cream, grey and black soften into one another, while the iron teeth catch only small lines of brightness. A lamp may be lit before long, and its smell will add itself to the room, warm, oily, and slightly smoky. You prepare the comb again, loading it with less wool than you might have used earlier in the day. A tired hand does better with a modest burden. That is one of the lessons work gives, without kindness or cruelty. The body has limits, and wisdom is partly learning to work within them. You pass the second comb through the first, slowly enough that the fibers open without a fight. The sound is softer now, almost like brushing dry grass. At this hour, conversations return in low pieces. Someone counts the remaining bundles. Someone asks whether the street outside is dried enough for the walk home. Someone wonders about the price of coal or the rent due, or whether a cousin might be taken on next week. These are not idle matters, but they are spoken gently because the day has worn the sharpness from every voice. You listen without always answering. Sometimes company is simply being within earshot. The LODZ factories outside do not end all at once. One engine may slow while another continues. One room may release its workers while another keeps the machines turning. The city exhales unevenly, and the sound reaches you through walls, windows, and floorboards. We stand with you in that layered noise, hearing the heavy pulse of industry and the smaller pulse of the wool room inside it. Both are real. Both have their own kind of tiredness. A lamp is finally lit, and the flame changes everything. Shadows lengthen behind the tools. The comb teeth become black lines tipped with gold. The wool nearest the flame glows softly, while the rest of the room recedes into browner quiet. The lamp smell rises at once, mingling with lanolin, oil, damp wool, old wood, and the human warmth of coats, sleeves, bread, and breath. It is not a clean smell exactly, it is a lived-in one, and it belongs here. Under lamplight, you inspect the last drawn sliver with more care. Small faults hide easily in yellow light, so you let the wool pass over your fingers and trust touch where sight has grown uncertain. A knot reveals itself as a tiny resistance. A burr pricks the thumb. A thin place feels cool and insubstantial, and you fold it back for correction rather than letting it pass. We move slowly because the end of day is where care can either fade or deepen. The foreman may be impatient, or he may simply be tired in his own way. He checks the tally, speaks to someone near the door, and returns to the table where finished wool waits. His role is not yours, and yours is not his. In the working order of LODZ, every person is watched by someone and dependent on someone else, though not always with fairness. Still, inside the motion of this particular evening, the comber's task remains steady. Good wool must be made ready, poor handling must not be hidden. The youngest worker has slowed visibly now, shoulders dipping whenever he thinks no one sees. An older hand nudges a basket closer to him, saving a few steps without comment. This too is part of the human weather of a workshop. People may be brusque, tired, worried, and practical, yet small mercies still pass between them in the form of a shifted stool, a shared rag, a warning about a bad tooth on a comb. You notice because you have received such mercies before. The last batch of the day seems to take longer than its size should allow. Time becomes elastic near evening, stretching around each task. You clean the comb, draw the fiber, inspect the top, set aside the waste, and then find another small thing needing attention. A tie has loosened, a basket label has slipped, a damp patch on the bench must be wiped before clean wool touches it. Each little matter says, "Not yet, not yet," and you answer with the patience left in you. Beyond the walls, the sky over LODZ dims behind chimney smoke, and the windows turn from pale rectangles into dark mirrors. If you glance up, you catch a faint reflection of the room, benches, lamps, moving shoulders, and the blurred white of wool piled in baskets. It is strange to see the workplace reflected back after living inside it all day. For a moment, you are both worker and witness. Then the comb catches and the hand returns. A wool comber's labor is often hidden inside the finished cloth. The buyer may admire the smoothness of a suit length, the fall of a skirt, the even surface of a woven piece, and never think of the hands that aligned the fibers before spinning began. That hiddenness is not an insult in itself. Many necessary things are hidden. Roots beneath soil, beams behind plaster, stitches inside seams, and the combed preparation inside fine yarn all hold the visible world quietly together. We can let that thought rest softly in the room. Your final bundle is laid with the others, and the basket has a pale, cloudy fullness that pleases the eye. You do not admire it for long. There is cleaning to do. The bench must be cleared of waste, the tools wiped, the combs placed where their teeth will not be damaged, and the floor around your station swept enough that tomorrow's work does not begin in yesterday's disorder. The day is closing, but it closes through work. And as evening settles over the yards and the lamps take over from the windows, the 1870s LODZ wool comber begins the quiet ending of his shift, putting the tools to rest as carefully as he used them. The first act of ending is separation. Clean wool is covered or carried away, usable waste is gathered, and floor sweepings are kept from anything that might return to production. You stoop with the broom, and the bristles whisper over the boards, drawing together lint, straw, dirt, and stray fibers into soft, uneven lines. The motion is slower than combing, but it has its own rhythm. Sweep, draw back, gather, lift. The roux changes as the floor appears again. Your back protests when you bend, and your knees answer when you straighten. The body, released from the bench, now reports what it has been holding in silence. We listen kindly to those reports. The fingers are tired, the shoulders are heavy, the eyes are dry from fiber and lamplight. Yet the act of cleaning gives the day a clear edge, and there is relief in seeing the workspace return to order, even if the order will be disturbed again tomorrow. The combs are wiped with a rag that has darkened from use. You work between the teeth carefully, removing caught fiber and oil because neglect would greet you in the morning with a harder task. The iron is cool now, and the handle bears the warmth of your palm a little while before losing it. You set the tool down with the teeth protected. It is not tenderness exactly, but it resembles tenderness, the respect given to something that has helped carry the day. In the 1870s, LODZ wool room, tools are not abundant luxuries. They are kept, repaired, shared, watched, and sometimes argued over. A good comb matters. A sound bench matters. A basket without splinters matters. The factory may belong to someone whose house has tall windows and polished floors, but this smaller world of tools belongs to those who use them carefully. You know which handle fits your grip. You know which chair rocks. You know which rag is too oily for clean work. A worker near the door shakes out an apron, and a pale cloud rises briefly before sinking. Another ties a bundle, pulling the cords snug with a practiced motion that does not crush the wool. Someone counts under his breath. Someone laughs softly at an old remark from earlier in the day, late enough that the joke has changed into memory. The room is not lively, but it is not empty. It is full of people returning slowly from concentration. You untie your apron and feel the cooler air reach the clothes beneath. That small change is surprisingly sharp. All day the apron has been part of your body, taking lint, oil, crumbs, dust, and the brush of fiber. And now it hangs from your hand like the shed skin of the shift. You fold it or hang it, depending on custom, and bits of wool cling stubbornly to the cloth. They will still be there tomorrow. Some traces never leave at once. The hands need washing, though washing does not restore them completely. Warm water, if there is some, loosens the oil and darkens as it runs over the knuckles. Cold water wakes the skin. Soap catches beneath the nails and mixes with lanolin into a smell that is cleaner but still not separate from work. You rub the fingers together, palm over palm, thumb into palm, and watch cloudy water drip into the basin. The wool room is leaving you slowly. By the time coats are taken from pegs, the air outside seems both colder and wider than before. The door opens, and the city enters with evening damp, horse smell, chimney smoke, and the faint sourness of mud disturbed by many boots. You step into it with the others. For a moment, after the close, fiber-thick air of the room, the outdoor air feels almost large enough to drink. We pause there, just long enough to feel the change. The yard is dim, but not dark, because lamps burn in windows and along the factory walls. Smoke moves low, flattened by weather, and the brick buildings hold the day's heat in a way you can sense when passing close to them. Somewhere behind you, a machine continues. Somewhere ahead, a door opens onto supper, laundry, children, or a rented room with damp walls and a stove that must be coaxed. The LODZ wool comber leaves the bench, but he does not leave the working city. The walk home is part of the day, though no tally records it. Your boots find the firmer patches of street by habit. Mud grips at the edges. A cart passes close enough that you smell wet leather and hear the harness shift. Other workers move in the same direction, some quiet, some speaking in low voices, some carrying bundles or tools, or the simple weight of themselves after labor. We walk among them without hurry, because evening belongs to the tired. LODZ, at dusk, has a softened industrial beauty, not polished, not gentle in the way of gardens, but full of human signs. Light shows in small windows. Laundry hangs stiff in yards. Smoke lifts from cook fires and factory stacks together, making no grand distinction between home and work. A child stands in a doorway and watches the passing workers with solemn curiosity. A woman shakes a cloth from an upper window. Somewhere, onions meet hot fat in a pan, and the smell reaches the street like a promise. You may stop for bread, or for a word with someone you know, or for nothing at all, because the feet want only home. The pay, when it comes, must stretch across rent, food, fuel, clothing, and the endless small needs that gather in any household. We do not sharpen the thought. We simply let it exist beside the warmer details, because warm realism has room for both. The wool comber's life is not a painted postcard. It is a body in time, doing necessary work and returning again and again to those who depend on him. As you walk, your hands remember the comb, even while hanging empty at your sides. The fingers curl slightly, as if holding a handle that is no longer there. This happens with many trades. The body carries tools inward. A typesetter feels letters after leaving the case. A baker feels dough in the palm. A lockkeeper senses the turn of a wheel. And the LODZ wool comber feels fibers passing between finger and thumb. Work continues as an echo. At home, the room may be small, and the light may be poor, but it receives you. The smell of wool enters with your coat. Someone may notice, though no one says it every time. You wash again if water is ready, sit if there is a place, and eat what the household has managed to make from the day's means. The first mouthful after labor has a plain, deep comfort. Bread, potato, cabbage, soup, or tea can feel generous when the body has earned its hunger slowly. Conversation at home is different from conversation in the wool room. It has other concerns, other softnesses, other silences. A child may ask something small and practical. A wife or mother may speak of a neighbor, a bill, a torn garment, a market price, or the need for more fuel before the week turns colder. You answer as well as tiredness allows. The day has narrowed your words, but not your listening. Sometimes listening is the work left for evening. The hands, even after washing, are still rough with the day. A faint fibre clings near the cuff. A dark line remains under one nail. The skin at the thumb is tender where the comb handle pressed, and when you bend the wrist, there is a dull remembrance of each afternoon pass. These are not injuries in the dramatic sense. They are the ordinary signatures of labor, and they speak quietly enough that a person can live beside them. If there is lamplight, it falls over the table in a smaller, kinder circle than the factory lamp. The room beyond it rests in shadow. Outside, the city continues, carts passing later than expected, a dog barking once, footsteps in the stair, and distant machinery sounding like weather from another part of life. You sit within these sounds and slowly become less of the worker at the bench and more of the person at home, though the two are never fully separate. Clothing is brushed or shaken, a sleeve is checked for a tear, perhaps tomorrow's bread is wrapped before sleep, or the apron is considered, or a small repair is made by tired fingers that have already done enough. In working homes, the end of paid labor does not always mean the end of labor. Still, the pace has changed. Movements are smaller, voices are lower. The evening has gathered everyone nearer to the lamp, and as night settles over Lodz, with smoke folding into the dark above the roofs, the woolcomber's day loosens its hold, leaving only the softened echo of fibre, iron, oil, and breath. Sleep does not always come at once after a day of repetitive work. Sometimes the body is tired before the mind agrees. You lie down and still feel the combing motion, the draw across the fibres, the small catch, the easing back, the pass again. The room is darker now, but inside the hands there is still pale wool moving through iron teeth. We let that motion become slower. It no longer belongs to production, it belongs to rest. The sounds outside thin gradually. A late cart fades down the street. A door closes below. Someone coughs in another room, then quiets. The factory district never becomes countryside silent, because Lodz carries industry even into the night, yet the noises soften when heard from bed. They become part of the background, like rain, like wind under eaves, like a distant wheel turning without asking anything of you. The workday is over. The body knows it first. In the dark, the smell of the wool room remains faintly in the hair and skin. Lanolin, oil, soap, smoke, damp wood, and the warm animal scent of fleece have followed you home in traces too small to wash away fully. There is comfort in a familiar smell when the day has been honest, even if the work was tiring and the room was close. It says that the hours were real. It says that the hands did not pass through emptiness. You might think, briefly, of the wool left covered in the room, waiting without impatience for morning. The combs rest with their teeth still. The bench holds its scratches in darkness. The baskets sit where they were placed, finished top protected, waste separated, tools wiped clean enough for another beginning. No part of this scene hurries toward you. It simply waits. The stillness of tools after work is one of the calmest stillnesses there is. The 1870s Lodz woolcomber will return, of course, because the mills will breathe again, the yards will fill with footsteps, and new locks of wool will ask to be sorted, warmed, oiled, combed, drawn, checked, and carried onward. But not yet. For now, you are allowed to leave the fibre in its basket, the comb on its shelf, the tally in its book, and the factory behind its brick wall. For now, the day's pattern can loosen. We rest with that pattern a little longer. Disorder, then sorting, tangled locks, then aligned fibre, cold hands, then warm hands. A full bale, then a fuller basket of prepared wool, and finally the quiet bench, waiting in darkness. The rhythm is simple enough to hold without effort, and deep enough to settle the thoughts when they wander. You do not have to finish anything more tonight. Beyond the window, Lodz lies under its smoke and stars, though the stars are often hidden by the working air of the city. Somewhere, wool that passed through hands like yours is becoming yarn. Somewhere else, yarn is becoming cloth. The chain continues beyond sight, but you do not need to follow it now. Your place in it has been held for one long day, and the day has released you slowly, gently, one breath at a time. And in that release, before the morning asks for footsteps again, the room grows softer around you. The last sounds of the street move farther away, and the memory of the comb passes once more through the mind, smooth as prepared wool, drawn carefully into silence. The silence is not empty, because even in rest there are tiny workings, the settling of boards, the soft shift of breath, and the far-off murmur of a city built around labour. You lie within it, as the LODZ wool comber might have done, feeling the day loosen from the fingers one small memory at a time, while the combs sleep somewhere behind factory walls. The hands no longer move, but the mind, gentle and drowsy, may still pass over the bench, the basket, the lamp, and the pale prepared wool resting under cloth. There is a calm kind of knowing that comes after repeated work, when the body has been tired by motions it understands. It is different from the tiredness of confusion. It has shape. You have done the same careful thing many times, and each time it changed a small part of the world, turning matted fleece into clean length, and clean length into something ready for another worker's hands. That knowledge does not need praise. It lies beside you quietly, like a folded coat. In the room where you sleep, the air is cooler than the wool room, and the blanket has its own rough comfort against the cheek. Outside, the street darkens into a softer version of itself, with mud no longer showing its ruts and walls no longer showing their soot. A late passerby may cross the yard below, and the step fades quickly. A stove clicks as it cools. Somewhere in the building, someone murmurs in sleep, and the sound is brief enough to become part of the quiet. The 1870s LODZ wool comber lives in a city that is always becoming something else, yet sleep returns him to the older measures of body and breath. The factories may grow taller, the orders may grow larger, and machines may take on more of the combing that hands once did, but a tired worker still needs darkness, warmth, and the chance to let the fingers uncurl. We can stay with that plain human need for a while. It asks nothing sharp of us. Before sleep fully comes, thoughts sometimes wander back to the wool itself, not as a product, but as something touched. You remember the difference between a good lock and a stubborn one. You remember the way warm oil changed the drag of fiber against iron. You remember how the best prepared top lifted from the comb with a faint, almost watery smoothness, as if the fleece had learned to flow. These memories are simple, and because they are simple, they can become soothing. The wool has traveled through weather before it ever reached LODZ. It grew beneath rain, frost, sun, and wind, on the backs of sheep moving across fields that smelled of grass, mud, and animal warmth. Then came shearing, packing, hauling, weighing, selling, storing, and finally the opening of the bale in a dim room where your hands took their place in the chain. Thinking of that journey can make the day feel wider without making it louder. It is enough to imagine the fleece passing from field to workshop, from workshop to thread, from thread to cloth. By morning, the bench will wait in the same position, and yet it will not be exactly the same bench, because yesterday's scratches, fibers, and handprints have joined all the others. This is how work gathers history, not only in ledgers, not only in factory records, not only in the names of owners and streets, but in worn handles, smooth boards, patched aprons, and the habits of bodies returning day after day. The great story of LODZ is made of these small returns. You can hear it best when you listen softly. The first return begins before the city is ready to look at itself clearly. A pale line gathers near the window, and the air carries that early chill that comes before smoke has thickened the street. You wake with the heaviness of someone who has slept, but not luxuriously, and for a few moments the room is only shapes, blanket, wall, chair, coat, and the faint square of the window. Then the day remembers you. Work is waiting. There is no drama in rising. You put on the same clothes, or nearly the same, and the fabric is stiff in places where yesterday's dust and fiber remain. The cuffs are worn. The boots are not fully dry. Bread is wrapped, if there is bread to take, and perhaps a little onion or cheese is tucked beside it with practical care. We move quietly here because households wake in layers, and no one wishes to spend the first strength of morning on unnecessary noise. The walk back to the wool room carries a familiar mixture of reluctance and acceptance. Cold air touches the face. The street smells of damp ash, horse dung, coal smoke, and bread from an oven somewhere behind a courtyard wall. LODZ has not yet become loud, but the signs are there. Carts being readied, Shutters opened, gates drawn back, and the earliest workers moving with collars lifted against the morning. You join them, not as a symbol, but as a person with a place to be. The factory yard receives you again with packed earth and old puddles, and the buildings stand around it like dark companions. A chimney exhales steadily into the low sky. A door opens, letting out a breath of warmer air that smells of wool, steam, and yesterday's labor. You step inside, and the change is immediate, from the wide cold of morning to the close, fibrous warmth of the workroom. It is not comfort exactly, but it is known, and known things can comfort even when they are hard. The combs are where they were left, and this gives a small satisfaction. The bench has remained ordered. The baskets have not been disturbed. The rag lies folded near the oil, and the cloth lining of the finished basket is still smooth enough for clean fiber. A working day begins well when yesterday ended well. You can feel that truth before anyone says anything, and usually no one says it. The room simply allows the first task to begin without trouble. The first bale opened that morning has a different smell from the one before. It is a little sharper, perhaps stored longer, perhaps damp in its journey, and when you press the wool between your fingers, it does not spring back quite as kindly. You note this silently. The 1870s LODZ wool comber is always taking in such information, though much of it never becomes speech. Good work often begins as private noticing. The hand pauses, judges, and continues. Sorting begins again, and because we have been here before, the repetition feels even slower and deeper. You separate the long locks from the short, the cleaner from the more troubled, the open fibers from the clotted ones, and each choice prepares the future thread in a way no finished garment will remember aloud. The sound is low and dry. Wool brushes cloth. Straw ticks faintly against the bench. A worker breathes through his nose because the air is still too cold to breathe deeply through the mouth. Morning talk is sparse at first. People arrive from different rooms, different beds, different worries, and their faces have not yet taken on the common expression of labor. A nod is enough. A word about the weather is enough. Someone mentions that a wheel rut near the gate has deepened, and someone else answers that it deepens every week, because even complaints become routine when they belong to the same street. Then the wool draws attention back into the hands. The young worker near the window fumbles with a lock and pulls too hard. The fibers break unevenly, and the older comber beside him makes a low sound, not angry, only corrective. You see the lesson pass between them. Less force, more patience. The wool must be opened before it can be aligned, and opened gently if its length is to be preserved. This is true of fleece, and perhaps of many things, though in the room no one needs to turn it into a saying. The morning light shows every small particle in the air. Dust and lint drift slowly, as if the room has its own weather, and when a worker crosses the beam, his sleeve carries a pale fringe of fiber. You blink against it. You rub your nose with the back of your wrist. The smell of warm wool grows stronger as more bales are opened, and more bodies gather around the benches. The day is assembling itself piece by piece, breath by breath, task by task. A pail of warm water comes in, and steam rises with that soft, cloudy motion that makes hard rooms feel momentarily tender. The wool that needs dampening is handled carefully, pressed and lifted, never beaten into submission. Water darkens the fiber and releases field smells that dry wool had held more faintly: earth, sheep, grease, and the old green memory of grass. You let the excess drain. Drops fall into the pail with patient, irregular sounds. It is easy, while half awake, to imagine the wool as only softness, but the comber knows its stubborn side. It can mat, cling, hide burrs, carry grit, and punish haste with tangles that multiply under careless fingers. You learn not to romanticize it too much. Warm realism is quieter than fantasy. The wool is beautiful because it is real, because it smells strongly, catches under the nails, tires the wrists, and still becomes something finer through steady attention. When the combs are warmed, if this is one of those mornings, the iron takes on a gentler working temper. You feel the difference as the lock passes through. Less drag, more flow, a smoothness that makes the first successful draw of the day quietly pleasing. We can linger over that sensation, the mild heat near the knuckles, The faint oils shine, the cone teeth parting fiber after fiber until the tangled shape becomes a clear, pale fan. The day has found its key. Outside, LODZ grows louder by degrees, but the wool room filters the city into a low woven background. A whistle sounds somewhere beyond the yard. Boots cross the passage. A delivery cart stops, and a voice argues briefly about weight or timing before the words blur into the wall. Inside, the main sound remains the combing, the soft scrape and pull, the occasional click of iron, the rustle of wool being laid into baskets. You settle into it again as into a familiar song with no sharp refrain. The foreman brings word of an order that requires cleaner preparation, though the details are less yours than his. Better top, less waist, careful length. He speaks with the practical compression of someone who has already repeated himself in several rooms. You listen because the instruction will live in the fingers more than in the ear. The combs must be loaded more evenly today. The inspection must be slower. Waste must be watched without becoming fearful of necessary waste. A good comber understands that removing the short fibers is not failure. It is the point. The Noils left behind in the comb are not evidence of carelessness when the long fibers have been saved and aligned properly. They are the material truth of preparation. You clear them away, gather them, and keep the clean tops separate, because each kind of fiber belongs to its own path. This calm sorting of what can go forward and what must be set aside has a deep, steadying logic. By the second hour, your body has returned to the old negotiation with the bench. The seat is hard, so you stand. The feet higher, so you sit. The wrist stiffens, so you change the angle. The thumb grows sore, so you shift the pressure toward the fingers. These small adjustments keep the day possible, and they are often invisible to anyone who only counts bundles at the end. We notice them because they are part of the craft. The cloth on the bench has picked up a fine shine from use, worn smoother where wool has crossed it countless times. You brush it clean before laying down a fresh lock, not because the cloth looks dirty from a distance, but because one hidden splinter or crumb can disturb a prepared length. The hand moves flat across the surface. It finds roughness, it clears it away. There is peace in such modest order, especially in a city growing too quickly to feel orderly from the street. Another worker speaks of the new buildings near Piotrkowska Street, where shops, workshops and grander houses seem to rise every season. His voice carries neither wonder nor bitterness, only the tired interest of someone who watches a city change around his wages. You have seen those fronts, perhaps with signs, lamps, and people passing in cleaner coats. Then you have returned to the yard, the bench, and the wool. The city has many faces, and this room is one of them. The prepared top begins to gather in the basket, pale and airy, as if the morning has produced a small cloud that can be lifted by hand. You lay each length carefully beside the last. Too tight, and it compresses. Too loose, and it tangles. The right arrangement feels almost like folding sleep into cloth, soft upon soft, with enough air between the layers to keep them alive. We stay with that image gently, because it belongs to the work. As the hours pass, the smell of the room deepens again. Fresh wool, damp wool, old wood, iron, oil, coal smoke, and the human nearness of workers in heavy clothes all blend into a single atmosphere. It settles into the throat. It settles into the hair. It makes the outside world seem thinner when the door opens. You may long for fresh air, but when fresh air comes, it is almost startling, cold and sharp, like biting into an apple too early in the morning. The work has a moral feeling, though not a preached one. You do the next necessary thing. You keep clean wool away from dirty waste. You correct a fault when you find it. You do not pretend a tangle has disappeared, because it is hidden under a smoother layer. In such small disciplines, a person can find steadiness without needing to name it. The LODZ wool comber may not speak of philosophy, but his hands practice a patient kind of truth. Near mid-morning, a bundle from the earlier work is brought back for another look. There is a thick place in the sliver, not ruinous, but enough to require attention. You take it without resentment, because returned work is part of work. The uneven section is opened, combed again and drawn more gently. The fiber resists at first, then yields. When it is right, it no longer announces the correction. It simply joins the rest. Quiet and smooth, This is one of the gentle comforts of repair. Not everything must be perfect at the first attempt. Some things return to the hand and become better through a second pass, a slower breath, a more careful angle. We can hear that lesson without waking ourselves too much. The comb goes through the wool again. The body remembers. The floor softens. The finished length settles into the basket as if it had always intended to be there. A little before the meal pours, hunger returns with more clarity. It is not dramatic, only persistent, like a small hand tapping from inside the body. You smell someone else's bread before unwrapping your own. You hear a stomach answer, and the owner of it smiles without embarrassment because everyone in the room understands the hour. Work makes the body honest. The wool keeps moving until the pause becomes possible. When the tools are set down, the room exhales in many small ways. A bench creaks as weight shifts. A comb is laid carefully beside another. A worker steps outside and brings back cold on his coat. You unwrap the bread, and its dark surface feels firm beneath the thumb, while the inside is dense enough to satisfy slowly. If there is onion, its sharpness cuts through the wool smell and wakes the tongue. If there is tea, it warms the hand before it warms the chest. We sit again with the LODZ wool comber, not apart from the others, but slightly inward, where tiredness and hunger make a small private room inside the public one. The conversation moves around you. A rent due, a cousin arriving, a child's boots worn through, the price of soap, a rumor about more machinery coming into another building. None of these subjects rises into drama because the day has no room for grand speeches. It carries practical worries in a low voice. The mention of machinery lingers, though no one speaks of it for long. Combing machines have been changing textile work in many places, drawing fiber through rows of pins and rollers with a speed no hand can match. In LODZ, as industry expands and capital gathers, the old hand skills live beside mechanical processes, sometimes feeding them, sometimes being pushed aside by them, and often simply adapting because households still need wages. You may not know where the future is going, you only know the afternoon will require work. There is a quiet dignity in not pretending certainty. Workers in changing trades have often lived that way, feeling the ground shift under familiar tools while still needing to perform the day's task well. The hand comb may one day be used less in this room, or used only for certain fibers, or replaced by a machine tended by different hands. Yet today, it is still here. Today, the handle fits your palm. Today, the wool must pass through iron teeth, and you are the one who guides it. After the pause, the body returns more slowly than the mind wishes. You stand, stretch without making a show of it, and take the comb again. The first motion after eating is careful because the afternoon has not yet accepted you back. Then the rhythm gathers, as it always does, not suddenly, but by small permissions. The lock opens, the fiber aligns. The Noils collect, the top forms under the hand. You are back inside the work. The light through the high windows shifts, and so does the task, as the LODZ wool comber moves from the meal's small comfort into the long, patient afternoon of maintaining quality when tiredness begins to live in the room. The afternoon's first locks are chosen more carefully because the wool that seemed manageable in morning light can become less friendly when the hands are slower. You spread each tuft across the bench cloth, and the fibers catch the pale window glow in uneven lines. Some long and bright, some short and dull, some matted into tiny hidden knots. The LODZ wool comber learns to see with the fingers at this hour, because the eye can become lazy after so many pale heaps and repeated motions. So you touch, pause, and decide. The comb is loaded lightly, and the pass through the wool begins with a small resistance that travels up the wrist. You ease the angle, not forcing the fibers to obey all at once, and the resistance breaks into a smoother pull. The sound is quieter than tearing cloth, rougher than brushing hair, and it belongs exactly to this room, where iron, wool, wood, and tired hands have made a language of their own. We listen to it without hurry, because the sound tells us how the work is going. A weak shaft of sun lies across the floorboards, and every passing boot interrupts it with lint, shadow, and dust. The boards have warmed a little under the day's labor, though the corners still hold a damp chill that rises when the door opens. You can smell the street each time someone enters, mud and horse sweat and coal smoke, before the wool room folds that smell into its own thicker air. Nothing arrives here unchanged. Even the outside seems to become part of the fiber. The finished top from this batch is smoother than expected, and that gives you a modest inward pleasure. No one needs to praise it. You feel the steadiness in the length itself, the even softness as it gathers into the basket, the way it bends without breaking and springs lightly when laid down. Work sometimes rewards care in a form only the worker notices. It is a small yes from the material. Nearby, a worker with a cough steps closer to the door for a breath, then returns before the room has fully noticed his absence. The cough is ordinary, not a story in itself, and the day continues around it with the practical sympathy of people who know that bodies have limits but wages have dates. Someone shifts a stool for him. Someone else moves a basket so he need not reach as far. These little helps pass under the noise of industry, like threads under a woven pattern, present and holding, though seldom displayed. The foreman brings another bale forward, and its sacking rasps against the floor as two men drag it near the sorting table. The mark on the cloth is smudged from travel, but the wool inside will speak more plainly than any chalk. When the cord is cut, the packed fleece relaxes outward with a faint spring, releasing a stronger sheep smell, damp and warm and field-like, beneath the grime of storage. You breathe it in, not deeply, but enough to know the bale will need careful handling. This wool has more vegetable matter caught inside it. Tiny burrs hide close to the fiber, and straw fragments lie crosswise where they can snag the comb teeth. You begin with sorting rather than full combing, because a problem found early is gentler than a problem carried forward. The fingers pick, loosen, spread, and separate, and the bench slowly fills with chosen locks on one side and rejected bits on the other. The work looks humble, but it saves the afternoon. The younger worker watches how you handle a burr lodged deep in a lock. You do not pull it straight out, because that would tear too many long fibers with it. Instead, you open the wool around it, teasing from both sides until the burr loses its hold and drops into the waste with a tiny dry tick. The lesson is quiet enough to be missed by anyone counting only bundles, but the young worker sees it. We see it too. In a city growing as quickly as LODZ, many lessons are learned this way, passed by glance, gesture, and imitation, rather than by formal instruction. A person enters the room not knowing how much pressure is too much, how damp wool should feel, how oil changes a stubborn lock, or how to protect clean top from a rough basket edge. Then, day by day, the room teaches. It teaches through mistakes, corrections, sore wrists, better bundles, and the slow pride of doing less damage than before. The afternoon air becomes closer, and the high windows hold a pale film where steam, smoke, and lint have met the glass. You wipe your forehead with the back of the wrist, careful not to bring oily fingers to the face. Your shirt clings lightly at the shoulders, while the cuffs remain damp from earlier handling. The room is neither hot nor cold in any simple way. It is a mixture, like most working rooms, with warmth at the center and chill waiting at the edges. The combs move again, one fixed or braced, the other passing through with a steady pull. Each pass removes more short fiber and matter, and the long wool begins to lie in one direction, as if it has accepted the day's intention. You clear the teeth, load again, draw again, and place the resulting length with the others. The repetition might sound plain if described too quickly, but inside it each motion is slightly different, adjusted to weight, feel, dampness, length, and fatigue. That is why it holds the mind gently rather than emptying it. A cart rattles over stones outside, and the sound travels through the wall with a hollow tremble. The basket near your knee shivers once, then settles. Someone at the far table murmurs about a delivery coming late, and another answers that everything comes late except the rent. There is a little laughter, warm but brief, and then the room folds back around its tasks. Even humor here learns to keep working. You think, perhaps, of the path this wool will take after leaving your hands. It may be drawn more evenly by machines, spun into worsted yarn, wound, warped, woven, finished, pressed, and measured, until the softness you guided becomes part of a cloth with a name, a price, and a destination. Yet none of that future makes the present lock less immediate. It lies before you now, a pale, imperfect thing asking to be prepared. The future can wait its turn. The LODZ woolcomber's attention narrows when a difficult patch arrives. The room recedes a little, not vanishing but becoming background, while the fingers concentrate on one tangled place. A knot has formed where damp and pressure held the fibers together, and it will not open by impatience. You hold the lock near the base, loosen the outer strands, turn it slightly, and comb in shorter passes until the tight center begins to yield. The satisfaction is quiet, almost private, when it does. By late afternoon, the body has learned the day so deeply that motions happen before words can follow them. You reach for the rag without looking. You clear the left side of the comb when it starts to load unevenly. You shift the finished basket away from the draft when the door opens too often. We might call this skill, though it does not present itself proudly. It simply keeps trouble from growing. There is a small warmth in knowing where everything belongs. Oil can buy the right hand, waste basket under the bench, clean top behind the cloth line, damp locks nearer the pail, dry locks away from the splashing. In a life where many things may feel uncertain, the ordered workspace offers a little island of sense. It is not freedom from hardship, but it is a kind of calm. The afternoon work also carries a rhythm of checking other people's needs without leaving your own task. When the young worker's basket is too full, you nudge an empty one within his reach. When an older man's comb catches at the same bad tooth twice, you pass him the cleaner rag. No speech is needed for these exchanges, and no gratitude is performed. In rooms of long labor, help often wears the shape of efficiency. It is still help. The wool continues to gather pail on pail, and the finished basket begins to resemble a low bank of cloud under the work table. You lift one layer and place another beneath it, keeping the fibers from compression. The touch is almost tender, though the day itself has not been tender. Perhaps that is one reason such work can calm a listener so many years later, because even within industry, even beside accounts and whistles and soot, there were gestures of care that had to be exact or the material would suffer. The LODZ of the 1870s is often remembered through growth, factories, owners, strikes, streets, and astonishing speed. But here we remain with the slow hour inside that larger movement. We remain with the person whose task is not to own the mill or design the machine, but to sit near the fiber and give it readiness. History is not only made by the loudest machinery. It is also made by hands that repeat a precise motion until the motion becomes part of the goods passing through the city. The light is lowering now, and color leaves the room gradually. Cream wool turns grey at its edges. Brown wood grows flatter. Iron teeth flash only when angled toward the window. You feel the shift before anyone mentions lamps, because the eyes begin to ask for more from the fingers. Touch becomes steadier. The hand takes over where the light grows thin, and the wool still answers if handled well. When the lamp is brought closer, its flame trembles with the draft from the door, then steadies under its small chimney. The smell changes at once, with kerosene or oil adding a warm, sharp thread to the wool and coal. Shadows deepen under the benches. Faces become softer and more lined in the amber light. The room appears older by lamplight, as if the work has slipped back before the new machines and tall chimneys into a longer human history of fiber, fire, and hand tools. You begin a final, careful inspection of the bundles made since the meal pause. Each length passes across your palm, and the fingers search for the hidden faults sight can no longer be trusted to find. A thick place, a weak stretch, a stubborn seed, a little twist where the fibers crossed against the direction. You correct what you can, set aside what must be redone, and protect what is ready. The evening asks for honesty. The foreman counts with tired lips, and the ledger receives its marks with dry scratching sounds. We do not need to know every figure to understand their weight. The marks will stand for hours, bundles, expectations, wages, and perhaps corrections tomorrow if the work does not satisfy another room. But in this moment, they are only pencil lines beside the wool. The worker's body has already kept a truer account in shoulders, fingertips, breath, and the ache behind the eyes. A last difficult lock, is brought to your bench because you have a patient hand for such things. It is not a compliment spoken warmly, perhaps only a practical decision, but it carries recognition all the same. You take the lock and feel its trouble at once. Too damp in one place, too compact in another, with short fibers tangled through the longer ones. The comb must be used sparingly, and the fingers must do the first opening. You lean closer. The room is dim around you, but the small field of work remains clear enough. The lock opens slowly. Waste comes free in little pieces. The better fiber begins to separate and align, though not perfectly, because no worker can turn poor material into fine material by wish alone. Still, it improves. That is the honest measure. You make it better than it was, and then you draw from it what can properly go forward. A calm pride belongs to improvement, without illusion. As you finish, the younger worker watches again, and this time his own hands imitate the slower motion before he realizes he is doing it. We can let that moment rest. Skill moves through generations and workplaces in such small transfers, not always through formal teaching, not always through kind words, but through watching someone make a stubborn thing yield without violence. Tomorrow, he may do it better. Perhaps he will show another one day. The end of the shift approaches, not suddenly, but like a tide drawing down from the room. Fewer fresh locks are opened. Finished bundles are moved away. The sound of combing becomes less continuous, broken by wiping, tying, counting, covering, and small closing tasks. Your hands, which have spent all day making order from wool, now turn toward making order from the workplace itself. The day is nearly done, yet it still has edges to smooth. You cover the prepared top with cloth, making sure the corners lie flat and the wall beneath is not crushed. A basket is lifted carefully to a safer place, and its wicker handle presses a familiar line into the fingers. Waste is pulled from the comb teeth and set where it belongs. The rag moves over iron, darkening a little more. The bench, once crowded with locks and slivers, begins to show its worn surface again. There is relief in seeing wood. Someone opens the door wide for a moment, and the evening air enters with a cool rush that raises the hairs along your wrist. The lamp flame leans and recovers. Outside, the yard is already dim, with brick walls holding the last dull red of day near their upper edges. You hear a horse stamping, a man calling from another doorway, and the far uneven breath of machines not yet stopped. The city is ending by layers. The broom is taken from the corner, and sweeping begins with the same modest discipline as everything else. Clean waste is kept apart from dirty sweepings. Stray wool that might be reused is gathered before the floor dirt claims it. Dust rises, catches in the lamplight, and settles again on sleeves, benches, and hair. You sweep near your station first, drawing the fibers into a soft row, then lifting them carefully so the room will not begin tomorrow with today's neglect. The sound of sweeping changes the mood. It is lower and broader than combing, a hush across wood rather than a scrape through fiber. The room feels larger as benches clear and workers stand. A few backs straighten with small groans, quickly hidden or ignored. Someone rubs his wrists. Someone counts the remaining ties. We are nearing the threshold between worker and walker, between the close wool room and the cold street beyond. The combs are placed away from edges because a fall could bend teeth and ruin a morning before it begins. You lay yours down with the handle facing the direction your hand will expect tomorrow. It is a tiny act of kindness toward your future self. Many workers do this without naming it, arranging a tool, folding a cloth, leaving a knot easy to loosen, saving one small difficulty from meeting them at dawn. Care can travel forward one day at a time. You untie the apron, and the body notices the release as if a band has loosened around the waist. The cloth is heavy with lint and smell. You shake it gently where it will not disturb clean wool, then fold or hang it on the peg that has become yours by repetition. The peg does not bear your name, perhaps, but the room knows habits as well as labels. Tomorrow your hand will reach there again. At the wash basin, the water has cooled, and the first touch makes the skin draw back. You wash anyway, rubbing oil from the palms and fiber from between the fingers. The water turns cloudy, then grayish, with small pale strands floating on the surface. Soap slides over the knuckles. It catches in the small cracks made by work. Cleanliness comes only partly, but partly is enough for leaving. A worker beside you examines a small cut near his nail and wraps it with cloth, more annoyed than alarmed. Another splashes water over his face and comes up blinking, suddenly younger for a moment. The room has a way of making everyone look older by afternoon and then returning a little life when the shift ends. You see that, and perhaps they see it in you. No one says so. The evening has no need for speeches. The door to the yard stands open now, and the coolness beyond it feels wider with every passing minute. Coats are taken from pegs. Caps are pulled down. Lunchcloths are folded and tucked away. Crumbs shaken out only where they will not mix with the work. Someone checks a pocket for a coin, a key, a scrap of paper, or a bit of bread saved for a child. These small searches belong to departure, as much as wiping tools belongs to ending labor. Before stepping out, you glance back once at the room. The lamps make yellow pools on the benches. The covered wool rests in pale mounds. The combs are still, the baskets aligned, the floor swept well enough to meet morning without shame. It is not beautiful in any polished sense, but it is deeply complete. The day has passed through it and left order behind. We pause there with you just a moment, because endings deserve to be noticed. Then the yard receives your footsteps, and the cold reaches through the clothes more quickly than expected. The air smells of damp brick, smoke, manure, wet leather, and cooked food drifting from workers' homes nearby. Above the factory roofs, the sky is a low, dark blue, though smoke softens its edges and hides the first stars. LODZ is not quiet, but its evening noise is different from its morning noise. It is looser, warier, and more human. Workers move through the gate in small groups, each carrying the posture of a different task. Spinners have their own tiredness, weavers another, dyers another, and wool combers another still, held in the wrists, thumbs, shoulders, and the fine fiber clinging to cuffs. You recognize some of these tirednesses by sight, because the body becomes a record of the trade. A man can leave the factory, but the factory leaves with him, at least until sleep has done its patient work. The street outside is muddy where traffic has stirred it all day. Your boots choose a path by memory, avoiding the deeper ruts and shining puddles. A cart passes with its wheels half sunk, and the horse's breath shows briefly in the evening air. The driver speaks softly to the animal, not gently in a sentimental way, but with the practical calm of someone who knows tiredness in another body. The cart moves on, leaving a wet line in the road. As you walk, the hands begin to cool after the wash water and the outdoor air. You tuck them near the body, but the fingers still remember combing, curling slightly as if around a handle. This echo may continue all the way home. It may continue into sleep. We let it be soothing rather than burdensome, a fading motion without demand, like a wheel still turning after the power has been cut. The work is no longer asking for more. It is only leaving slowly. The windows along the street glow unevenly. Some rooms show a bright lamp, some only a dull red stove, and some remain dark because fuel costs money, and money has other claims. Voices pass through thin walls and open doorways, softened by distance. A child calls, then coughs. A woman laughs once, low and tired. Somewhere, a pan is set down on a stove, with a ringing note that fades into the damp evening. The city gathers itself indoors. The LODZ woolcomber walks through this ordinary evening as part of a great movement he may never describe in great terms. Textile goods will leave the city. Money will move through offices. Owners will plan. Clerks will write. Machines will be bought. Buildings will rise. And people will continue to come from villages and towns with hope, need, skill, and worry packed together. But for you, this evening is narrower and truer. There is home ahead. There is food if the day has been kind enough. There is a place to sit. At the door, the smell of the household meets you before the room fully does. Soup, cabbage, bread, damp wool coats, soap, smoke, and the close warmth of people living in limited space all mingle into a scent different from the factory, though not entirely separate from it. You step inside, and the street begins to fall away. The shoulders lower a fraction. The cap comes off. The hands, still rough, become hands for the household again. A child may notice the lint on your sleeve and pick at it with curious fingers. You smile, or you simply let it happen because the touch is light and the room is warm enough. Someone asks whether the day was hard, and the answer may be only a small sound, neither complaint nor denial. It was a day. In working homes, that phrase can carry everything necessary. We understand it without opening it too far. The evening meal is plain, and its plainness is part of its comfort. A bowl warms the hands. Bread fills the mouth slowly. The taste of onion, salt, potato, or cabbage settles the body after the dusty, oily air of the workroom. You eat with the calm hunger of someone who has been waiting since afternoon, and each swallow draws you a little farther from the bench. The combing motion remains, but it is weaker now. Conversation moves around the table, or around whatever surface serves as one. There may be talk of a neighbor's baby, a torn boot, a letter from a relative, the cost of coal, or whether the weather will turn colder before wages come again. You answer when you can, and when you cannot, you listen. The quiet listener is not absent. He is simply tired in a way the others recognize, because they have their own tirednesses folded inside them. Later, when the dishes are moved and the lamp burns lower, you look at your hands properly. The palms are lined darker than they should be. The nail edges hold shadows. One thumb is tender where the handle pressed all afternoon, and the skin of the fingertips feels slightly polished by wool and oil. These hands have been inside the day more completely than the face, more honestly than the words. You flex them once, slowly, and let them rest. If there is mending to be done, someone does it by lamplight, and the needle passes through cloth with a tiny repeated sound. It is another fiber task, quieter and domestic, and perhaps the rhythm of it speaks to the work you have just left. Thread through fabric, wool through comb, day through body. These things belong to the same world of patient making, where life is held together by small acts, repeated until they become almost invisible. We can drift with that thought. The room grows softer as evening deepens. Children settle. Neighbors quiet. The stove gives less heat. The lamp flame shortens a little, and the shadows move closer to the table. Outside, LODZ continues in muted layers, a wagon late on the road, a door downstairs, a distant whistle, a dog, a human voice blurred by walls and weather. None of it asks you to rise. Not now. When you lie down, the bed receives the body in pieces. First the shoulders, then the back, then the legs, which seem to lengthen with relief when they are no longer holding you upright. The hands find their place near the blanket, open now, no comb inside them, no lock to tease apart, no basket to protect. The day has not vanished, but it has become memory, and memory is lighter than labor when sleep is near. The last images come without order, a bale relaxing when cut open, steam lifting from a pail, iron teeth gleaming under lamplight, a basket filling with pale top, bread in a cloth, mud on the street, a child's fingers picking lint from a sleeve. The images do not need to form a story, because the body already knows the story. It began in cold air, passed through wool and work, and returned to warmth. Breathing slows, and the combing motion inside the mind slows with it. The fibers no longer snag, the burrs fall away. The long strands lie together, smooth and quiet, gathered into a soft length that does not need to become anything tonight. We leave the factory room in darkness, its benches waiting, its tools placed safely, its covered baskets resting where careful hands set them down. The LODZ wool comber sleeps, and the wool sleeps too, held in its pale, patient order. Before dawn gathers again, the factory yard holds its own kind of rest, with carts stilled, gates dark, and smoke rising more slowly into the cold. The war room is empty, but not abandoned, because every tool has been left in relation to tomorrow's hand. The combs lie where they can be found without searching. The covered baskets keep their pale contents from dust. The benches, scratched and worn, hold the memory of bodies leaning close to work. If we could walk there before the first worker returns, we would hear the room differently. No voices, no scraping combs, no soft argument between fiber and iron, only a faint ticking from cooling pipes perhaps, or the settling of wood as the night air presses into the corners. The smell remains even without people, deep in the boards and cloths, a settled mixture of wool, grease, oil, damp, smoke, and old labor. This waiting is part of the LODZ wool comber's day, even though he is not there to see it. The tools rest so the hands can rest. The wool waits so the worker can sleep. The day folds itself away, not into disappearance, but into readiness. And readiness is one of the quietest forms of order. We can let the room stay empty for a few breaths, because even emptiness has texture when it belongs to a place of work. By morning, footsteps will return along the street, and the city will begin again with a chill that seems to rise from the mud itself. You will feel it first through the soles of your boots, then along the fingers before they warm around the tools. The factory door will open, and with it the old scents will meet you. Not fresh, not unpleasant, but familiar enough to tell the body where it is. The 1870s LODZ wool comber enters the day by smell almost as much as by sight. There are mornings when the wool room feels kind, and mornings when it feels reluctant. On kind mornings, the bales open well, the locks are long, the comb teeth run cleanly, and the finished top gathers in the basket with little correction. On reluctant mornings, damp has settled into the fibers. Burrs hide everywhere. Tools need attention. And every simple task seems to bring another small task behind it. You learn to accept both kinds. The work does not ask what mood you brought from home. The first hour is always a negotiation between cold hands and demanding material. You rub your palms together, lift the comb, and feel the handle's morning chill soften under your grip. A little oil is measured by touch, spread sparingly, and worked into wool that has been opened just enough to receive it. The lock responds slowly, the way a stiff hinge responds to careful pressure. The teeth pass through once, catch, pass again, and then the fibers begin to lie more willingly. We stay close to the hands because the hands know the truth of this job. They know when the wool has too much grease left from scouring. They know when it has been overwashed and made harsh. They know whether the fibers have length enough for the smoother worsted path, or whether too much of the lock will fall away into short waist. The mind may describe these things later, but the hands meet them first, in the moment before language. A wool comber in 1870s LODZ stands at an old crossing between hand skill and industrial scale. Around him, the city grows into a textile power, with steam engines, spinning rooms, weaving sheds, dye houses, warehouses, and offices linking local labor to distant markets. Yet the task at the bench still depends on small judgments repeated patiently, as if the age of machines has paused beside the worker long enough to watch a thumb and forefinger separate a stubborn fiber. This is not a contradiction. It is how change often happens, old rhythms living inside new walls. The wool itself may come from different places, and each bale carries a quiet geography. Some locks feel finer, some coarser, some cleaner, some full of the dry reminders of fields, sheds, carts, and weather. You may not know the full route it traveled, but you feel the route in its condition. A damp bale tells its story differently from a dry one. A well-kept fleece opens with a generosity that poor storage cannot imitate. Sorting makes these differences visible. You place longer locks in one area, shorter in another, troubled fiber aside, cleaner fiber forward, and the bench becomes a small map of usefulness. The work is not harsh in its judgment, it simply recognizes paths. This can go forward, this must be cleaned further, this belongs to waste, or to rougher use, or to another room where different standards apply. The calm division of materials gives the morning its first structure. The room fills slowly around you, one worker after another taking up a place in the shared weather of fiber and breath. Someone coughs into a sleeve, a young man drops a cord and stoops for it before it rolls under the bench. These are the small openings of a workday, unnoticed by ledgers but known by everyone who has ever entered a room before full strength has arrived. We enter with them gently. As the daylight strengthens, the high windows show their imperfections. Bubbles in the glass bend the factory yard into wavering shapes, and soot along the frame makes the pale sky look already used. Dust drifts upward and downward at the same time, caught in currents of warm air from bodies, lamps, water, and machinery beyond the wall. You breathe carefully. The wool room has its own season, made not by calendar alone, but by fiber, heat, damp, and the number of people working close together. The combing begins in earnest when enough locks have been prepared. You load the teeth evenly, avoiding clumps that would force the tool to fight the wool. Then one comb passes through the other in a steady arc, drawing long fibers away from short, clearing the line, making the disordered fleece more suitable for spinning into smooth thread. The motion is repeated so many times that an observer might stop seeing it. You never stop feeling it. Each pass has a beginning, a middle, and an end. At the beginning, the teeth meet resistance, and the wrist measures how much force the lock will tolerate. In the middle, the fibers loosen, sliding over iron with a soft rasp, while Noils and burrs collect where they must. At the end, you lift, clear, and look, letting the material tell you whether another pass is needed. This slow reading keeps the work from becoming blind. The old combers are not always talkative, but their silence is not empty. They hold practical knowledge in posture, timing, and the way they do not hurry when a knot appears. If you watch them, you see that the surest hand is often the least dramatic one. It moves with economy, it wastes no sharp gesture. It does not wrestle the wool into shape, but persuades it by taking exactly the pressure needed, and no more. We learn by watching, as the younger workers do. The day brings little variations, and those variations keep the craft alive. One batch needs slightly more warmth. Another must be opened by hand before touching the comb. A third has fibers long enough to draw beautifully, and for a few minutes the work feels almost smooth beyond effort. The basket fills with an even, pale top, and the eye rests there gratefully. In a room of soot-dark walls and worn aprons, clean fiber can seem like captured light. There is pride in that, though it is a quiet pride. A LODZ wool comber does not stand back and declare beauty, not in the middle of a wage day with more work waiting, but the satisfaction exists all the same. It appears in the way you smooth the top before covering it. It appears in the way you keep dirty waste away from clean fiber. It appears in the small hesitation before you let a finished bundle leave your bench, as if confirming it truly carries the care you meant to give it. By mid-morning, the room has found a working hum. Not one sound, but many small sounds braided together: comb teeth, boots, wood, cloth, breath, pails, doors, distant belts, and the muffled city beyond. We sit inside that braid, letting it become steady enough to hold the listener without waking them. The wool passes through the combs. The hands continue. The day, which once felt cold and uncertain, now feels fully underway. A worker near the window unwraps a bit of cloth to check his food, then wraps it again when he sees the hour is not yet there. Hunger arrives early when the work began before dawn. At hunger must learn patience too. You notice the motion because you have done the same. The bread waits, the wool does not. Still, the knowledge of food nearby gives a small comfort, like knowing there is warmth in another room even before you enter it. When the pause finally comes, tools are laid down with care, because a comb tossed carelessly can cause more trouble than a worker has patience for after eating. You wipe your fingers enough to hold bread, though grease and fiber still mark the skin. The first bite is dense and plain, and the mouth works slowly. Around you, the room lowers its shoulders. Conversation rises only a little, as if even words must keep to the pace of the shift. We hear fragments rather than speeches. A neighbor has found work in another mill. A cousin is coming from the countryside. A child needs warmer shoes. Someone says the streets near the newer buildings are crowded, and someone else says crowded streets mean work, though not always good work. The talk has the softness of bread in the hand and worry kept low. No one solves the city over a meal pause. They simply live in it together. The LODZ of the 1870s is often described as restless, but at the bench it is measured through repeated contact. Factory expansion becomes a longer shift, or a new foreman, or a different kind of wool arriving at the table. Trade routes become marks on bales and fibers beneath the fingers. Industrial growth becomes smoke in the throat, wages in the pocket, rent due, and the steady need to return in the morning. History touches the worker through practical surfaces. After the meal, the afternoon begins with that slight heaviness we know by now. The body would prefer a longer rest, but the day offers only what it offers. You stand, roll one shoulder, and let the comb settle into the hand again. At first, the motion feels less natural, as if the pause has put a thin sheet of distance between you and the tool. Then the distance wears away. The wrist remembers. The fiber opens. The afternoon work often belongs to endurance rather than freshness. You are not learning the day's material now. You are keeping faith with it. Each lock still needs judgment. Even though your mind might prefer to drift toward evening, each bundle still needs protection from dirt. Each line of top must still be inspected, because tiredness is precisely when small faults try to pass unnoticed. We stay here, in this modest vigilance, because it is where much real work lives. The air near the benches grows warmer and drier, while the corners remain damp. This unevenness gives the room its odd physical feeling. One cheek warm, one ankle cold, hands greasy, throat dusty, back slowly stiffening under the day's repeated bend. You shift your weight, adjust your sleeve, and continue. A person learns to work inside discomfort without making a grand enemy of it. The body complains, and the hands answer with small changes. There is a rhythm to cleaning the combs that can be almost soothing. Waste caught between the teeth is loosened and drawn away in little tufts, some grey, some brown, some pale with oil. The teeth are wiped from base to tip, the rag darkens, the iron appears again. A clean comb does better work, and a worker who keeps tools ready saves strength later, which is another kind of thrift in a life where strength is counted carefully. The Noils have their own soft look when gathered together. They are shorter, less ordered, more cloud-like, and they do not carry the same promise as the long-prepared top. Still, they are not nothing. In textile work, almost everything has a use if someone can find the right place for it. This knowledge changes how you look at waste. It makes the room feel less like a place of rejection and more like a place of sorting destinies. Fiber by fiber. Sometimes a cleaner, longer lock comes through the difficult wool, and the hand recognizes it with pleasure. You lay it aside for careful combing, saving it from the rougher pile. The lock shines faintly under the light, and when opened, it spreads like a small fan across the benchcloth. It is a beautiful thing in an ordinary room. You may not say this aloud, but your touch says it, because you handle it with more patience than a thing of no value would receive. The afternoon light leans lower, touching the faces at a different angle. It brings out lines of fatigue and softens the dust on hair and sleeves. The younger worker's attention wavers, then returns when the older comber clears his throat in warning. Not every correction needs words. The room has many signals, and after enough days, you hear them all. A cleared throat, a shifted basket, a comb set down too hard, a pause that means someone has found trouble in the fiber. By this hour, the city outside has thickened with movement. Deliveries come and go. Workers from other rooms cross the yard. A clerk passes, with papers held carefully away from mud. The contrast between clean paper and dirty yard is striking, but both belong to the same enterprise. The paper records what hands have made. The hands make what paper will record. We notice this without turning it sharp. The world is full of paired labours that rarely fully understand one another. The woolcomber's knowledge is not written in the ledger, but it shapes what the ledger can count. If he works poorly, the numbers may still appear, but the yarn later complains. If he works well, the smoothness travels forward, hidden inside spinning, weaving, finishing, and sale. Many kinds of value move invisibly this way, carried forward by people who may never see the final result. There is a deep calm in recognizing the hidden work without needing to make it loud. A small draft slips along the floor, and the loose fibers at your feet stir as if breathed upon. You draw them together with the broom's edge before they scatter farther. Clean material must be protected from floor dirt, and dirty material must be kept from clean. This boundary is simple, but it must be maintained all day. It is one of those ordinary rules that become almost moral through repetition. Keep the clean clean. Keep the useful useful. Do not create trouble for the next hands. The last fresh bale of the day is not opened fully, only loosened enough to prepare for morning. There is wisdom in leaving tomorrow a clear beginning without starting what cannot be finished well tonight. You cut a cord, inspect the exposed wool, and cover it again loosely so air can reach it without letting dust settle too freely. This is another act of forward care, like placing the comb with its handle ready. The future is softened by small preparations. As evening approaches, The lamp is lit earlier than anyone would prefer. The flame changes the room from a place of daylight labor into a place of shadows and amber edges. You see the wool differently now. Under lamplight, faults hide and surfaces flatter themselves. So the hand must become more honest than the eye, and you let the top pass through your fingers slowly, searching for the little irregularities that would otherwise travel onward. Touch becomes a kind of lantern. The room's sounds shift when people begin to think of finishing. There is less continuous combing and more setting down, more tying, more checking, more quiet movement around baskets and tables. A worker counts under his breath. Another asks for cord. Someone wipes a bench in long strokes that leave the wood darker for a moment. We can feel the work gathering its edges inward, making itself small enough to close. The final inspection has a tender fatigue to it. You do not want to find a fault, but you must be willing to find one. The wool slides over the palm, cool, soft, slightly oily, and your fingers pause where the thickness changes. A small section is drawn again. Another is accepted. A third is placed aside for correction in better light. This is not failure. It is care refusing to pretend that tired eyes are the same as finished work. Outside, the evening sky has lowered into smoke and blue-grey shadow. A few lamps show along the yard, and their light glimmers in puddles darkened by coal dust. The factory walls hold the day's heat poorly, and when the door opens, cold air moves through the wool room like water. You welcome it and resist it at once. Freshness feels good. Chill settles quickly. The body is complicated in its wants near the end of a shift. Tools are cleaned with slower motions now, because speed has left the hands. The comb teeth are cleared one final time. The rag passes along the iron, then over the handle where oil has gathered from repeated grip. You examine the teeth for bent tips and trapped fiber. A tool put away properly is a quiet favor to the next morning, and the next morning will need all the favors it can find. We set that thought down gently. The floor is swept, and the waste piles reveal the character of the day's wool. More burrs than yesterday, more short fiber, a little more dirt near the sorting bench. The room's floor tells a story the ledger will simplify. You see it because you helped make the story, one lock at a time. The broom gathers the evidence into manageable lines, and the lines become heaps, and the heaps are lifted away. Order returns, not perfectly, but enough. When coats are taken down, they smell of the room before they touch the body. Wool dust has settled on shoulders and collars. Smoke from the city clings to the fabric. You shake the coat once, then put it on because outside is colder than the coat is dirty. The cap follows. The food cloth, now empty, is tucked into a pocket. The apron hangs on its peg, limp with lint and use, waiting to become part of you again. A last glance at the workroom shows the day's full shape. Bales opened and covered, baskets filled and moved, waste separated, tools placed, benches cleared, lamps burning low. The people who filled the room are becoming silhouettes near the door, each leaving a little space behind. The LODZ wool comber steps out with them, carrying no bundle of wool, yet carrying the day in every tired joint and scented thread clinging to his sleeves. The yard is darker now, and the mud reflects small pieces of lamplight. You step carefully because fatigue makes the foot less clever. Someone nearby talks about the weather turning colder, and another answers for the sound that could mean agreement or only tiredness. The gate opens onto the street, where the city smells stronger than it did inside. Wet brick, coal, horses, cooked cabbage, damp wool coats, and the faint sweetness of bread cooling somewhere behind a shutter. We walk home again through LODZ, but each evening walk is not quite the same. One night, the mud is deeper. Another night, the moon shows briefly above the chimneys. Another night, a cart blocks the lane, or a neighbor joins your steps, or you stop to buy a small thing the household needs. These differences rest inside the larger sameness, and the sameness is what lets the tired mind drift. Street, gate, bench, comb, basket, bread. Street again. The factories behind you continue to glow in places, as if parts of the city never sleep fully. Their windows hold yellow rectangles, and within them, other workers are finishing, cleaning, counting, or beginning another stretch of labor. You do not need to enter those rooms tonight. Your own room is enough. Your own task has been carried as far as the day allowed. The The wool in its covered basket no longer asks for your hands. At home, warmth meets you in uneven forms, a stove warmer on one side, a lamp brighter on the table, a blanket folded over a chair, and voices softened by familiar walls. You remove your coat and release the factory smell into the room, where it mingles with supper and soap and the damp clothes of others. This is how working households smell, not of one life, but of several lives brought indoors after separate labors. The air keeps everyone's story for a while. You eat, speak a little, listen more, and let the body come back from its long forward lean. The hands rest near the bowl, the wrists feel broad and dull with ache, the thumb may throb when bent, and the fingers still hold the curve of the comb handle. No one in the household needs a detailed account to understand this. They can see the day in how slowly you reach for bread. Later, when the room quiets, you might take a small scrap of wool from your sleeve and roll it absently between finger and thumb. It is hardly anything, a stray fiber that followed you home, but touch wakes the whole room of memory. The bench returns, the lamp returns, the comb teeth pass through the lock once more, then you let the fiber fall or tuck it away without thinking, and the evening continues to soften. The city outside becomes a lower murmur, a footstep on the stair, a cart far off, a voice beyond a wall, and then the small interior sounds of people preparing for sleep. Fabric rustles. A cup is set down. A child turns over. The lamp is lowered, and the room changes from amber to shadow. We follow the change slowly, because this is where the workday finally becomes something the body can release. Lying down, you may feel the ache more clearly, because stillness gives each tired place a voice. The shoulders speak first, then the wrists, then the fingers, especially the thumb and the base of the palm where the handle pressed. But the voices are not alarms. They are reports from a completed day, and as your breathing slows, even those reports begin to lengthen, blur, and drift apart. The body has come through the day. In the mind's last clear pictures, the wool is already transformed, not into finished cloth, not yet, but into a lined softness, pale and ready, held in the calm shape your hands helped give it. The tangled locks of morning have become smooth lengths under cover. The burrs have been removed, the short fibers have found their pile, the tools rest, the room waits. You can let every part of that order stand without tending it further tonight. And somewhere in the dark factory, beyond the yards and streets and sleeping rooms of LODZ, the combs remain still on the bench. The baskets breathe under their cloths, and the pale wool holds its quiet direction until morning comes again.